So today we're talking about similar topics. In the Jewish Community Council of Greater Coney Island, there are common reactions post-trauma: losing hope for the future, problems at work or school, avoiding people, places, and things related to the experience, feeling jumpy, easily startled at sudden noises, feeling distant or detaching, losing sense of concern about others, having dreams that are upsetting, or memories, being unable to concentrate or make decisions, and feeling on guard or alert all the time. Some physical symptoms are stomach upset, trouble eating, severe headache when thinking about the experience, feeling shaky, pounding heart, rapid breathing, worsening of ongoing medical problems, sweating, trouble sleeping, feeling very tired, smoking, alcohol, drugs, overeating, not maintaining exercise diet, safe, sex, regular health care, and emotionally, feeling nervous or helpless, fearful, sad, shocked, numb, loveless, and joyless, being irritable or having angry outbursts, getting easily upset or agitated, feeling detached, not wanting intimacy, blaming the self for harm or having negative views of the self or the world, unable to trust others, getting into fights, trying to control everything. And I want to talk about how we discover, these various aspects. So obviously trauma has to be healed in a very specific way because this energy has to move. So it's not like every single healing works for every person, every community, or every group is a safe space for every person. But eventually there has to be a sense of safety and processing and integrating. So I want to talk about a few topics related to this. First of all, I learned in this group hosted by, it's called Interplay. We had a group by Sheila Collins and Christine Gautreaux, based on the book by Sheila Collins called Stillpoint. So when we talk about this other, the one that we're willing to devote to, the love, devotion, care we're willing to generate to nurture and encompass someone, the one that gives us meaning and worth and in our life, it's like we start to realize there's this hole, right? Now with trauma, there's this like black hole kind of. It's like this vortex almost, or this energy center that's sort of like a negative space. We're not going there. We're not healing. We're not processing. It was like a shock, a paradigm shift. The whole world changed for us. So Renee Brown says stories are data with a soul. Sorry. Stories are when you have information with a soul. And the danger of telling the tale is the thing. Sometimes we have to talk about what happened. So the self-inflicting, if it isn't true, if it isolates us, like, for example, we say, I'll be kicked out because I'm not strong or capable enough to manage keeping up like everyone else. Or I can't ask for alone time or privacy or space because even if it's someone I'm helping and I need the limits, or I'm not able, or I don't know how, or, basically in terms of, and in these ways, we sort of inflict ourselves further. Like, let's say there was a trauma of infliction or isolation. There's when we talk about it, it could actually make it happen. So, like, when I think about sometimes how we cope with it is often othering. Like I said, we go this hole inside. We look for something outside because there's this nothing inside, right? But really, like, for example, I'm thinking, I wanted to cook, cater to, serve someone, believe in them, empower them, submit, be guided for transformation, but that actually could happen on my own. I don't need someone else for transformation. I could do all those things for myself. And then if it becomes stable and substantial enough, I could actually include in my field another person. So I have to feeling that I have to speak or hear from my womb more. The womb itself, rather than listening to mostly the other parts of my body that are louder, could be that that's a part of my body I pushed down and didn't want to listen to. And it could be because of the traumas that I've been through that caused that. So we connect to different parts of our body. We learn to tell the tale. We see how we're othering ourselves or othering others. We see whether there's a hole inside or a vortex inside. We have this tripolar tension. There's this three muscles in this balancing act: rest / let go. Then we have play / curiosity. And third, we have seriousness or focusing. And recognizing that I am life, I'm able to be enjoyed like life is, beautiful, cozy, and like the flower that is so precious and gives its life to be in the vase, enhancing my life. For example, I have flowers right now, these beautiful, delicate, sweet little flowers. I just think they're so beautiful. They remind me of like snowflakes, like snow dipped in snow. This preciousness of holding on but not too tight to smother it, but still being a surrounding carrier. I think of the bird. You can't hold it too tight because then it's going to like get squashed. You can't hold it too open because then you're not protecting it and it could fly away or get hurt. Not holding so loose that it could fall or be dropped, and then also not like rejecting or abandoning it so it's like a waste. This is this idea of valuing preciousness. So after trauma, sometimes the very parts of us, the humane parts of us, the most precious parts of us have been treated like a waste or used like an object. So we think about this idea of being a vacuum cleaner beyond time without filling a bag, maybe like recycling what's been absorbed rather than worrying about where does the garbage go. So vacuuming in all of our own energy, like sometimes we have all these tentacle lost trails of like pieces. So there's a lot of aspects here of healing, and also, of course, most importantly, connection. An easeful journey when with a witness who's present and accepting. So in this safe space, we have someone who's witnessing us as we are trying on these outfits of who we were, who we are, who we're becoming, and in terms of our body, our ideas. If we could think of an object, think of the self, and then even choice, agency, power. And I think for me, a huge part of, I have a huge part of my work. What is work? We call avoda in Hebrew. Serving is actually a privilege, a purpose to be useful, impactful, and the one being served has tremendous responsibility, even a duty. So when we get past the I can't or I won't, it brings into others areas for us, like the breaking of it can't or it won't, reflected as unlimitedness. Now, let me say that in other words. If let's say I don't want to, or I just feel like I can't, if I could get over that and I actually can, and I actually will, the world reflects back this new breaking of those limits, becoming unlimited. And actually now, where I thought the world can't or won't, and I've given up or feel that I won't get my needs met and so on, it becomes, it can and it will. So it's this idea of like I become transformed, the world around me becomes transformed. And in Judaism, we actually say that when there's a master, he has to care for the one that is serving him as if they are precious to him, as one of the household, literally. Like if he has something that can't be cut in half, he has to literally give it to the servant if he's hungry or whatever. For me, there was like two other parts to this. So we've moved out of the interplay topics when I talk about avoda and whatever, but I want to talk about breathing and peeves. Peeves is this idea of what triggers us. If we're anyway healing from trauma, we have triggers. Can we protect ourselves from the areas where we are going to be past our window of tolerance and it's no longer going to feel safe in order to actually go and make these changes? So I thought when I'm too cold or too hot, I don't feel safe. Manipulative people or controlling people, when I have to hold in my pee or poop, when people make these fake voices, even flies or roaches being inside, people who are overtly defensive or opinionated or argumentative, people who just call when they're lonely and need something but don't actually like me or want to spend time with me, and men who make inappropriate comments to me when I'm not open sexually. So those are peeves. If that's ongoing, I'm not going to be able to be doing healing work at that moment that is happening until I get over this. Now, I wrote this a year ago. It's very possible I've made a lot of progress. I haven't actually read this and then decided whether to... I haven't actually gauged whether I feel that some of these are still peeves, but the idea here is that you figure out what your peeves are so that you know that when you're in that state, you're going to be past the window of tolerance. You can't feel safe while going to the feelings where you didn't feel safe before, the trauma, and healing it. And then another thing is the breathing. So the nervous system, information, inspiration, and fitness, literally to inspire means to breathe in, right? And to, so there's inspiration, which actually means to breathe in. And some people say exhalation, inhalation, and you can actually say inspire and expire, the breath. Each breath is almost like coming to life and dying. Then we have this idea of what's involved. We have diaphragm belly breathing. We have idea of taking in. We have newness and expansion. We also have this idea of stimulation, breath, relaxation breath, and regulation breath. And when we think about pieces that are involved, we have circulation of oxygen, respiratory whole system. So this is the health of the organs, of the system, to get it into the blood, the oxygen, to release the carbon dioxide. Our hormones are involved because they respond to how fast we're breathing or how deeply we're breathing. Our immunity and our creativity. Because there's when we're in a creative flow, we're breathing differently than when we're running. Running away or running after. There's this idea of the inner and out, right? So we talked about it's a minor death and resurrection. Like each breath that goes out, if the person didn't take another breath, they would be dying. And when we can slow down enough to be in the present moment, we actually can feel that our breath, we're the space for the breath, or we are the breath. We are the one that's coming in and going out, or we're the space for things to come in and go out. And besides for this diaphragm belly breathing, which is the more deeper breath, or really when it says belly breathing, we're not breathing out of our belly, but we're breathing in such a way that the diaphragm makes space by going down. So everything goes kind of into the belly, which can expand, and all this can be taken up with lungs. But guess what? There's also small muscles all over the neck, the shoulders, the ribs, and there's this idea of the box breath. So there's two kinds of box breath. One is the ratio of how long we're inhaling and exhaling and pausing. So we could do inhale for a certain number, 4 or 5, pause for that number, exhale for that number, pause again, inhale. Or we could think of it as that we have front, back, right, left, up, down. So you breathe, you could imagine you're filling up front and back, right and left, up and down, and then exhaling. And finally, when we do a lot of trauma work, we can actually, there's 2 more parts here. So when we do a lot of trauma work, we can actually start to get curious. Curiosity is where we don't actually think we know, and we don't have an immediate reaction because it's not like unsafe or safe like immediately. So I thought, for me, when I was looking at things like that, I felt like, so I started having this more what if, like maybe. So what if I'm in Crown Heights for a reason, the place where I moved to help people? That's why I entered this kind of exile. Like I went back in, I felt like I was living this like such a spiritual, holy, open life, and so it's like this messianic energy to help the Messiah of the energy without credit, commendment, acknowledgement. Like there's a good reason. Also, maybe what if there's a good reason for all my neck, shoulder, jaw, throat, ribs, waist, hip, pelvis pain, mostly on the right side, but sometimes it feels like I don't know where it is. Or what if I'm going to see how I didn't get a short end of the stick when it comes to men and relationships and home and work and money and service. And I have to say, I wrote this a year ago and I've learned so much. Actually, it's amazing. That's why I highly recommend journaling as part of our trauma healing work. What if I'm perceived as a mesmerizing healer? Like this idea that I don't need to become that, I am. And if I'm worried about how people see me, like they already see me that way. Or what if I have a lot of people who really love and care for me and want me to be happy? What if I'm only temporarily overweight, but it's not the long-term destiny plan? And finally, it's like a little bit of a longer section. I want to talk about how I healed from a certain trauma of feeling unsafe in the home. There was an experience I had with the man who I kicked out. I wrote these messages to a man who I kicked out, an aggressive man, from my apartment for making me feel uncomfortable, not listening, and turning a small thing into a big thing, which we call escalation, and displaying selfishness toward me, that I don't matter, my needs, boundaries, preferences are not important, and it became extra defiant. And he becomes extra defiant when he senses an opportunity to cause an impact by denying me my way, to like be powerful by preventing me, hindering me, an obstacle. So I wrote these messages, and this was for me very healing of the trauma of previous situations in my life. Now, not everybody are we always going to have an opportunity to do this. Like there are plenty of things that happen where I don't have a surrogate, for example, who could be in place of like my father, right? Like this time I was an adult, I could kick the person out. Now the bad news is that sometimes when we go through these kind of things, like afterward we realize this person was a surrogate. We were having a traumatized response because of previous trauma. Like for example, me with my upbringing with my dad, who's a very aggressive man, and I felt unsafe with him at home. And he was unpredictable and violent, and he would try to have power over me, overpowering, domineering. He would exploit my energy. So in this case, we're saying that there's a double-edged sword here. On the one hand, we often heal tremendously when we have a surrogate for the original story, for the original situations that were traumatic. On the other, and unfortunately, a lot of these people could be completely innocent, or they could be enough like that person that they give us this opportunity, but now we're an adult, we don't have to respond the way we did as a child, which could be burying it, holding it in, being quiet, not feeling, submitting, complying. So this is what I wrote. And this is someone who, I don't even know if this was a year ago, it could be more. This is someone who I had an on and off relationship with. And as I made major changes in my life, we could no longer be together, I felt. We didn't have the same faith and values and desires for how to live life and to start a family and so on, and in terms of being Jewish. And also, I had allowed him to come stay with me after he was very injured and needed a place to go. He had been violently assaulted in such a way that he ended up in the hospital for weeks. And then there's a court case still ongoing, and they're, going through evidence and everything. It's over a year ago since that happened. It's probably like a year and a half ago already. So I guess my point is that I think that in a way we could say like God gave me this opportunity, or I'm so lucky that my higher power, or that the universe, in my favor, helped me to get this energy out of me through this experience. And thank God it wasn't with such an escalation that it needed to be violent or even, with criminal activity and so on. In other words, when we get to have these opportunities, sometimes it could feel like the worst thing in the world, but we don't realize it could be the best thing in the world for us. And we get that out of our system, and we no longer need to work through it anymore. And we can make a lot of progress in therapy and in groups after we release this sort of stuck loop by actually completing the loop and moving forward in a new way. So these are the things I said, which helped me, and like I said, sometimes we could be punishing an innocent person, but most likely they are a stand-in because they have enough similar qualities to the earlier traumatizer who traumatized us. You cannot come back tonight. You're being disrespectful, disagreeable, a bad attitude. This is the person who was staying by me after the hospital for many months and who had made me feel uncomfortable, was very selfish, very dominating, had contempt for me, was being defiant, was causing me discomfort in my home, not listening. Besides for the escalating, was actually causing impact by denying me just to be able to do things my way in my own apartment, like getting in the way. You can't come back tonight. You're being disrespectful, disagreeable, a bad attitude. Just because there was a problem of the bad smell doesn't give you a right to make my life any worse. Have a good night. Go take care of yourself, and I'll decide tomorrow if you can come back for Shabbos. You wouldn't stop talking. You were fighting with me, and I worked 8 hours today. You wasted 8 hours doing nothing. You're like dead weight. You try to guilt me, threaten me, rather than do better. Ever since you came inside tonight, you were making my life worse for me. So you lost the privilege of being a guest in my home, and you broke my trust, which means it's likely you'll be allowed back tomorrow or for a few days. You'll not be, it's less likely you'll be allowed back tomorrow for a few days. You're selfish and lazy and you use it. You try to manipulate me and you behave like a parasite. Go away. You try to bully me and you don't listen or accommodate. I don't like being around you. You're inconsiderate. I do so much for you and you make almost no effort. You're very unhealthy and you try to put your toxic energy on me. Leave me alone. Stop bothering me. I clearly want space and don't have place for you because you're saying negative things in the hallway. I'll not talk to you until tomorrow. I'll not cater to you trying to abuse me. You're responsible for your choices. I'm not answering any more texts. I'm not answering the door. You chose to misbehave and you chose to disrespect me. You're careless toward me and ungrateful. And I have to take care of myself and have a healthy environment where I'm not threatened, disrespected, and abused. You're playing yourself. Go heal yourself. I'm busy and focused on my tasks. You avoid life and then try to dominate the life in me. But if you're life, then you're violating yourself. You can't control life. Just learn to control yourself. I deserve better. Good night. None of your tactics are... And then I didn't even listen. Like, that would have been more than enough. However, I didn't stop. I kept going. So we could see this was a trauma response. And who knows what I went through that day at work. Could be I was taking out, from work. So more text. Next, none of the tactics or manipulations can work. Probably he was continuing to talk through the door or texting. Face yourself. I'm being real and true. Go somewhere else for fake and lies. Next message. It's because I accept you and your emotions that I asked you to leave. I'm not wasting time trying to change you or force you. Simply, other things are more important to me than wasting time trying to turn an irritable, paranoid man into a trusting, agreeable man. And I have a duty to preserve my mental strength and the love in my heart. If your behavior cannot support my goals, or worse, disturbs me, then I can't have you here. I'm maintaining healthy boundaries as I heal the vulnerabilities you try to exploit in me so you can stay in denial about who you show up as in the world. Next message. I'm not going to lose my self-confidence and self-respect and self-trust just so that you like me for 1 minute. A few minutes later, you often find something else to be an excuse to be mean or disrespectful about again. Next message. My environment is sacred to me, and having a being here who is a disturbance and behaves in a menacing way is intolerable at this time. Next message. I'm not able to entertain your delusions at this time. Next message. None of your attempts to try to manipulate me will work. You're clearly not facing reality or speaking about the present. Next message. As you try to consume, convince, or prove that which doesn't need any spokesperson, you show you're unable to be authentic. You seem to have no sense of remorse for causing problems to someone who helps you, such that when they ask you to leave, which is something that should concern you greatly, as you demonstrate how now that you're too mentally immature to be in connection with another person, and that you keep trying to force me into a small limited story that is lies you tell yourself, I'll remind you that you do not display care for my needs, preferences, or boundaries. For example, I mentioned multiple times I'm preoccupied with things and don't want to give you my energy, but you're trying to provoke and argue, and it's very obvious you're trying to make an impact because you feel powerless. Next message. Each time you try to manipulate me rather than consider me and understand me and relate to me and reflect on the situation and yourself, you show how insignificant you need to be to me. You're disabled. I accept you, but I won't become disabled in denial with you. Good night. Next message. I am not putting you before Shabbos. If you'd be mindful of what's important, and if you would believe in yourself, you'd make sure to get rest and then reach out in the morning to prepare for Shabbat together, and then learn how to choose realness and rather than manipulations. If you want to continue trying to manipulate me because you're in denial, for example, how powerless you are in some ways, then you'll keep drifting further from the truth. Next message. I already said to stop trying to take my energy. Should I block you? Next message. I said if you would be mindful and take time to reflect on things, then you would get rest and try to do better, but you're wasting your time trying to convince me to clean up your mess and take care of you and tolerate abuse, all of which isn't going to happen. You can face reality. You're not more important than my 1, happiness, 2, peace, 3, Shabbos. You disturb my peace, happiness, getting things done so I can focus on Shabbos preparations tomorrow. So all your tactics, wishful thinking that you've been saying is worthless. You just show you can't face reality and rather live in lies and denial. Suit yourself. Next message. You're clearly in a very selfish place that you can't care or grasp or grow out of your forceful violating patterns. So take time to connect with yourself and care for yourself. At least rest. Good night. And last message. If you don't stop texting me, I'll block you. I said you can try messaging in the morning, so stop bothering me. And this is an example of a way that we could work through. Like in this case, I had the agency and I had the language and I had the ability to make new choices versus having to put up with these kind of things. I felt what was going on was like when I was a child. I wasn't allowed to have my own views. I wasn't allowed to make change. I wasn't allowed to do any of that because my father was so aggressive and so dominating. So in this case, I was able to heal. But however, we don't know for sure, unless we watch a video of it, whether he was actually doing all those things or whether I was perceiving all that and having it fit into that narrative just so I could get this energy out of my system. But I have not needed to go through all that, as far as I know, since then. There were a few times similar incidences with this person. I still care about him, even though he's mentally, even though he's healing his mental illness, and I don't exactly know how far along he is in that area. He's healed a lot of his patterns, but he too has had to get certain things out of his system. So sometimes we heal in concert with others, and in a way that the disharmony and the discord actually proves to become, harmony and coordination, kind of like concord. I think we call it concord, and I think that we can hold space for each other better and better as we heal our trauma. We recognize when someone's responding from a traumatized place. So I hope that is helpful, and I wish you all the best. Bye.